Hi guys, and welcome to the AWT show. So on this Halloween special, today we're going to be talking about tricky tenants. So we've all heard the stories about problem tenants in properties, whether they're not paying rent or they're damaging the property. But the reality is, I try my best to be a really good landlord. And this week I've actually been in court because we've had a problem tenant, so you came along with me, so unpaid rent. It's just a bit of a problem. It's a bit of a nightmare.
It's the hassle of the entire thing. Like, it's not just, on the whole, tenants are great. I think we should get that out there. But when you have something that you have to solve, like the whole legal system, eviction system, rent chasing system, like it is archaic and it is slow. Like a year's worth of back paid rent by the time you actually get someone out?
And because of the COVID situation, it's made it more difficult just recently.
Exactly. Like you just said there, the COVID situation, I'm very sympathetic to people's problems, and, like I say, I try my best to be a really good landlord, but when COVID hit and they changed the laws in terms of how long it could take till you got people out of your property, there were Facebook groups that were going around that were telling people to not pay their rent.
If you ring the council were like, no, don't get evicted, don't leave, stay in your house, because the council can't house them, and people end up obviously homeless, and the council are responsible for that, but they haven't got enough social housing to provide for them, so they just say to people, well, just fight out with your landlord, screw your landlord over, because we don't want to have the problem. Like, how wrong is that?
The thing is, there are problem landlords out there. That is an absolute God-given fact that there are problem landlords out there. So I get the fact that we need to change the rules to suit the problem landlords, but what about the good landlords?
Yeah, well, there's nothing at the moment to support them, or even there's no regulations. I know it's got to be tenant focused because of the bad landlords, but really there should be, if you've got a particular license, like the selective license, they should have one where you get tiers, I think, personally. And if you're a top landlord, you've got a bit of grace where if you've got a bad tenant,
like an accreditation scheme. So if you're a good enough landlord, you can prove that you know what you're doing, you look after things, and let's say you have to pass it once every year or 2 years or whatever, then you should have a different system to follow than if you're a terrible landlord who's not even changing the boiler when stuff breaks and all this.
I love the selective licensing system. You know full well that the reason I got into property was my big ethos was around making sure I provided good quality homes, because I've been in that situation where I've been in a problem property. But then on the flip side of it, where you've got tenants that are just not paying rent, they have the ability to pay you rent and they're choosing not to pay you rent because they're taking advantage of the system. It's just wrong.
Well, more importantly, they're taking advantage of you.
Wow.
And the system just helps them. Like, the system, especially around the whole eviction scheme, is designed to protect people because they're in their home. You don't want to take their home off them. I get all of that, but it was never their home in the first place. That's why you rent, right? So you have the freedom to just up and leave when you want. You don't have to worry about things like maintenance. You don't have to worry about a mortgage. Like, that's why you would rent. And it's kind of included within the package that, hey, you don't own this place. At some point, the guy who owns it might want it back.
To protect the tenants from the landlords evicting them at short notice. But if you've got a good tenant, you're never going to evict. One of my tenants has been in there 5 years now, and no problem with them. So, because they're paying and everything else. But again, if they're not paying, you want to be able to get rid of them.
I've got some fantastic tenants. One of my tenants has just got married. Send them a card. They message me, thank me. I visit the house once a year. They're great tenants. They're really great tenants. And then I've got one who's just not paying. And I've tried everything in my power to support this tenant. But have you ever had to evict a tenant?
Not yet. No.
Have you?
Not for one of my own houses, but I've just done it for some clients, yeah.
Have you been through the process of it?
Yeah, and we went a slightly different route to the way you did, and I think it's really interesting when you see the two sides of it, because we got one of these like fixed price eviction things, which, by the way, then ended up having 2 more sets of fees afterwards. It wasn't really fixed price, but that's a separate problem. And it's still like 1,500 quid in additional fees, plus your court fees, plus the 6,000 or so in missed rent that we've got, plus the interest. You're looking like 10 grand in costs.
Well, this is the thing, just for sort of context, I'll give you some context of the tenant. So the tenant, we missed a rent payment, contacted the tenant, everything okay, how can we support you?
Yeah.
She explained the situation, yeah, it's fine, we'll sort the rent out. Next month, and then the rent came in, it was a bit sporadic, and then we've had like about 4 or 5 months of rent coming up and down where it's not been paid properly.
Yeah.
So, have a conversation with her, how can we support you, what's going on, how can we support you in this situation? not necessarily COVID related, the reason why she wasn't paying rent. It was mainly just because things have changed in her life and she's probably not managing her money very well. So how can I support you?
Besides, there's loads of like things that came out as a result of COVID to help people who are self-employed, or people who have businesses, or people who have jobs and all the rest, but there wasn't anything for people whose income was their lettings.
Exactly. But,
there's nothing for that.
So, I've done everything I can with this tenant, but at the time when I was trying to evict this tenant, so there's two ways you can evict tenants. You've got your Section 21 notice, you've got your Section 8.
Yeah.
If you go through a Section 21 notice, you cannot claim back, if you go to court, your missed rent payments.
Yeah.
You have to go through debt recovery.
Yeah.
So my only option was to go through a Section 8.
Yeah.
Now, because of where we were, smack bang in the centre of all this coronavirus stuff, the best option I had was I had to wait till she was 6 months in arrears before we could serve her an eviction notice.
Let's say you don't pay your car insurance for 1 month, right? Then you're going to be a bit late. But I can't see them letting that go on for more than 2 months before they just cancel your car insurance. And bear in mind, like, you can get 12 points on your license and the government can go, okay, you should have a ban, but actually, due to exceptional hardship, you can actually keep your license, right? So what's the difference between that and someone's home?
Yeah.
Like, where it's the license and them being able to travel that provides the income for the family so they can eat.
It's similar if it was a commercial tenant,
Yeah,
you'd be able to evict them
instantly.
Instantly.
Anything else, if you're 6 months behind,
thing.
like, there wouldn't even be a battle about it. Like, you get to 2 months behind and then your service just goes.
Well, this tenant, I waited 6 months before we served an eviction notice. But then here's the crazy thing. I served an eviction notice. Do you know what she did?
What?
She paid down the bill, so it was no longer 6 months in arrears.
You can't serve it anymore.
So I can't serve the eviction notice.
Obviously, that's somebody that knows the system, and that's where it needs to be changed.
I'm still $2,500, nearly $3,000 out of pocket from this tenant. But she, like you say, she knows the system. And, I'm just going to read something to you, because it's interesting to see this. So if you use Section 8 eviction notice, and you were smack bang in the middle of coronavirus, the 29th of August 20 to May 21, you could give the tenant notice if they were less than 6 months in arrears of rent. If you give them notice and they were less than 6 months in rent arrears, you had to wait 6 months. The notice period was 6 months. So if the tenant owed you 4 months worth of rent, you had to give them 6 months worth of notice. Or you wait till they're 6 months overdue on rent, and then the notice period is 4 weeks. Okay? So that's the first thing. So we're 6 months there to that point, and then 4 weeks, so 7 months before that tenant's potentially out. That's if they leave.
Hey, that's just the start of court proceedings. Then, finish them.
Then, once you've served that notice, if they don't leave after the 4 weeks, then obviously you have to apply for court, which is 4 to 6 week process to get into court. Then if you go to court and court actually agree with all the information you've sent, and then they serve notice to tenants, in most cases you're looking at a 2 week period after the court sends.
Which they still don't have to get out.
Which if they don't get out then you're applying to bailiffs to get them out.
Which is court again.
Which is then another 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah. So this tenant could be in the property 11 months before you get them out of the property.
At least at the moment.
So 11 months of unpaid rent.
And then the solicitor we were speaking to the other day, he had something similar to this, and then sent the bailiffs round, and then they kicked up a fuss and locked the doors in the place so they couldn't get evicted, called the police, and even though they had a court summons, the warrant to go and seize the premises again, police were like, no, you can't go in. So I had to go back again the following day, and it was only with a bit of, well, he got the reporters involved, and that's how he got the people out. But it's just insane.
It's just insane. But the thing is, I mean, if this was your mortgageable property, in the UK, 63%, I believe, of households in the UK is private rented property. And then of that, I think about 16% is social housing.
Right.
Something like that, I think, is the figure. So that's a huge chunk of people that I actually think are not being looked after by the system. If you didn't pay your mortgage, 3 months of non-paid mortgages, and they would be applying to court to get you out of the property.
And 6 months they'd be repossessing.
Yeah,
and they'd have it through by the same time.
Yeah, you'd be repossessed.
You can be repossessed the same time as it takes to get a tenant out. So even though it's not your fault, and you still got to pay the mortgage. This is what it comes back to, so the whole speeding thing, the mortgage thing, your car insurance thing, like anything. If you're like 2 months behind Like, the world's coming for you. Everything unless you're a tenant.
I suppose the question is, the reason why I wanted to bring this topic up, I'm very fortunate that I have other properties, and them other properties, because the tenants are paying the rent, it's actually protecting this property, and it's covering the bills. So although I'm out of pocket, I am actually protected by my other properties. But if this was your first venture into property, and this was a HMO, or you took multiple units on and it happened with multiple tenants.
I've not had that situation myself. I'm aware of people that's done it on their first property. Not only had they had the bad tenant, eventually when they got an eviction, they'd also trashed the place, so they lost the money on the refurb. So they completely disheartened with the property and have left the property world. But
this is what I'm actually really worried about, because I am worried what my property is going to look like when I get it back.
Because it affects your valuation.
You can go for criminal damage, but again, if there's no money, they can't.
Well, the reality is, this tenant owes me a lot of money now, and when they finally leave the property through bailiffs or whatever happens, how am I getting my money back?
Well, like the court will say they have to pay it, but I mean, technically you can turn around and claim bankruptcy, but you could there's a load of other stages in between that would mean that you can just delay that payment for years on end. Or it ends up as a CCJ. Like, you can still live in this world with CCJ. She's not going to be buying houses anytime soon anyway, so it's like...
I mean, the thing with this is, we're talking about this from our side, from one-sided of, I'm owed money here,
There are advantages to the system being like this. If you are a tenant yourself and you have a particularly bad landlord, or not necessarily a bad landlord, just one that, let's say for example, like you've got a boiler that's on its way out, and it's on its way out, when they refuse to repair it, refuse to replace it, they just keep trying to give like botched jobs and all this, then you as a tenant can be like, well look, I ain't going to pay my rent. And they'll be like, well, I'll kick you out. And you'll be like, no, you won't, mate.
With a scenario, we've just taken over a tenanted property already. It's fully tenanted. The previous landlord not even repaired the window, not repaired the boiler, and everything else. So I've taken it on board. And we
people like that deserve to be in prison.
And we are replacing everything. We're going through the process, but also the tenant is happy to pay more money. So if the previous landlord had actually done what he's supposed to do,
after the tenant,
is
this is the type of property I lived in: single pane windows, mould on the wall. But like I say, we're looking at this from our side here, as the investors now, and saying, right, we're owed money. But like you just said, let's look at the tenant. How can we support the tenant? So in my example, that's even backfired on me. So the tenant, what I've said to this tenant is, look, you owe so much rent. This was last year, so we're coming up to Christmas. You're in arrears. What's going on? Finally got her on the phone. Finally had a chat with her, and she's like, "Oh, I'll pay you. It's like, but you can't though. You're struggling. I don't want to see you struggle over Christmas. I don't want to see you struggle with this. So the rent payment, £500 a month. How much can you realistically pay me?" She's like, "I can pay you the 500. But you can't, because you're struggling. You already owe me money.
Yeah, if you could pay the 500, you would have
I don't want to see you struggle anymore. So what realistically can you pay?"
Yeah.
And we come to the situation where I was like, right, realistically, for you to be able to pay me some money, support your household, support your kids, have a great Christmas, £300. And I said to her, was, if you pay me £300 for October, November, December, I will not put the extra £200 in the arrears. We'll write that bit off. The rent for them 3 months will be £300. Could that have been any more fair?
Not really. It's about what your mortgage.
What do you think happened in October?
I guarantee she paid you nothing.
She didn't pay me. Yeah. So when us as private landlords get this bad stigma, what more could I have done in that situation?
No.
Even now, when I served the eviction notice, which I served back in May, and it took that long to get to court, when I served the eviction notice, I said, look, I just want my house back so I can get some money in, I can pay the mortgage. If you leave by the end of the eviction notice, 4 weeks, I'll write the debt off completely. I'll write it off completely.
I'd have taken that if I was a tenant.
But
even if I played you until that point.
She didn't leave. And now it's gone to court, and now I'm being forced into this situation where I'm essentially, I think we're going to get to the situation.
There should be a tenant record as well, so when people have been evicted.
Yeah.
Because obviously you can get references from previous landlords or previous landlords, and we tend to do that a lot, which is, I think, helped us in terms of avoiding this. But there should be, in the same way there's an accreditation scheme that we want to introduce, which I think is a great idea for landlords, where the better you are as a landlord, obviously, you have slightly different processes in a legal case. But, with tenants, there should be some form of scheme there as well, that, a mark is put against them if they get evicted?
I mean, this is a really great question because, if somebody gets evicted, it can be completely situational. I've been in situations where, I've had problems with debt, and I've needed that support system that's around, so I've been there and I've seen what that looks like. But for somebody watching this that's thinking, oh my God, now I really don't want to get rented tenants in my property, what system would you like to see in place that supports the tenant and supports the landlord?
At the moment, your standard AST is 6 months to 12 months, isn't it? There should be one where it's similar, like it's almost similar to a serviced accommodation model, where it's a rolling monthly. You can have rolling monthly contracts, but the law is based on. So if they don't pay within 3 months, you can go through the process very quickly. Obviously, the council don't want, or the legal system don't want the process because there's not enough houses to put them into. But as a protected landlord, you should have something in place that says, okay, after 3 months of non-paying, we should be able to start the process. Because 3 months is a long time anyway.
Even now the rules have gone back to where they are. It's 2 months, 2 months rent arrears, and then you can serve notice.
But it's more than just a notice period, though, isn't it? It's stupid stuff
you
like
can serve notice, but by the time you serve notice, you've got the extra thing.
But this is it. So it's 2 months before you can serve notice, then 4 weeks. If you're lucky, it can be 3 months before the tenant's out.
Yes.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. This process isn't.
Even now, the current situation is 6 months.
Because of the courts.
It's more than just the notice periods, though. It's the tenants have more protection than they need everywhere. I mean, there's a public perception argument, which is going to be nigh impossible for the government to change, given the 100 years of propaganda. But it's stuff like if a tenant changes the locks in your property, you cannot go and change them back, or you can't have access to it, all this stuff. The 24-hour notice period, I think that's perfectly fine for a tenant. If you say to a tenant, look, you got to give 24 hours before you can just walk into your house, I think that's fair. But not being able to get access, and if the tenant changes the keys, you can't forcibly ask them to give them keys to your own house. That's a joke.
Have you heard about the breathing space debt moratorium?
No.
So if a tenant goes into rent arrears and you serve them notice, they can go to an accredited financial expert who and serve this breathing space notice. Financial expert.
They need time to.
A financial expert will look at their
how much more time do they need? They've got 6 freaking months to sort it out.
And put them on a debt recovery system, but you cannot do anything to that tenant for 6 months.
Hey, if these financial experts are so experts, then it shouldn't take them 6 months to solve the problem. I'm like, when we have financial issues in our business, if it takes us 6 months to solve it, we're already dead.
The thing is, I think
we've got to solve stuff in days.
I think this is a great system. I think people do, we bang on all the time, we talk all the time about not being educated about money. I was not educated about money when I was younger.
Yeah.
So I understand why people end up in this situation. So the debt recovery and the financial support, I get it, it's great.
It's a good idea, yeah.
However,
but not for the abuse of the system.
Not for the abuse of the system. So what's to stop a tenant, somebody to serving notice to a tenant, and the tenant, where is the line to say that actually this person's entitled to this breathing space? Can you appeal it? Can you challenge it?
No.
I think you should also be able to request bank statements, or at least have an independent person view it, because I'm not being funny, if they're spending £300 a week on booze and fags and not paying your rent, I think if they're going to be having this financial advice, and if they need time to go and consider all of this, then it's only fair that you should be able to grill it just as much as they do.
I suppose there's an argument there for
privacy.
Privacy, yeah.
That's also have an independent party do it, or have the court independently review it.
But prior to that, before the tenant even gets in the property, you've done your referencing, you've done all your checks, you've done everything. You can't tell if you're going to get a bad tenant.
No.
You can't tell if somebody's going to fall on hard times and fall into a difficult situation. So what is it?
We bought a property, the one we had evicted, and she'd been there for 4 years, never missed a rent payment.
What's the situation? How do you solve that?
I mean, most of the time we get around it with reference checks, guarantors, deposits, rent up front, and having a decent management company who kind of knows.
It's a management company as well to do the back history, but also somebody's situation can change within a period of employment. There could be employment one month, and then not having employment, and then they get things happen, and they check their whole mindset changes. So you can have that situation.
A lot of our HMOs are also rented direct with the employer rather than the employee.
I think
that helps, because you're never going to see the likes of Boohoo or Amazon miss a rent payment. Come on, that just isn't going to happen.
Well, the thing is, like you said, people fall on hard times. It's very unfortunate. It happens.
It does happen.
And I think it's I think the onus has got to be on the landlord there to open up the discussions and open up the line of communication to try and support the tenant. But when
there should then be a system where you can agree that and it becomes enforceable. So, for example, if you're going to do the £300 a month thing, which is more than fair, like, you know, you agree that with them, you even, you know, they offered you something, you went, yeah, but you can't genuinely afford that, and you weren't just like, you weren't greedy and went, yeah, you know, I'll take that, they've agreed to it. You were actually genuinely helpful, and were like, you're not going to be able to pay 500, let's agree 300. That should then be evidenced with like a formal contract.
And what landlords started to do at one point was take 3 months deposits, 6 months deposits.
Well, that's why they changed all of that.
And now they changed that to 5 weeks.
Yeah, because but that was their protection.
Yeah.
Because
what happened is, sorry to cut you off there, but somebody else, a private landlord, took advantage of the system.
Yeah, no, which is the problem.
But 5 weeks is not enough if they damage your kitchen. £500 a month you pay rent. 5 weeks you're looking at what, 600 quid? How much is your kitchen?
But if somebody's never going to be paying, the 5 weeks is
it's gone in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Your deposit should be allowed to be as long as the eviction process is.
I agree.
I know some people can't afford it with that deposit.
Well,
make
that's
the eviction
thing,
process faster then.
Yeah.
This is the thing, it's all around the eviction process. It's around that. You know, so if you've got evidence that you've just tried to support a tenant and you've tried to do everything in your power to support a tenant, why can you not get them out quicker? If you're a shitty landlord and you've not looked after your tenant, and then, you know, they've not paid you and you've ignored that tenant for 6 months and you want to get them out, then too right, the eviction process should be the way it is.
What about an automated system where if you're a top class accredited landlord and you can actually file all the relevant documentation that is necessary, so say evidence that you tried to approach a meaningful resolution, and obviously proof that they've lost all their, you know, or they've lost they're not paying rent, all that stuff, and they've done this, they've done that, done the other. There should be like an automated system where you can go online, file it, and then a clerk at a court and somewhere, and it can be done in like 2 weeks. It's all done online, all automated, because you're in that process where it's a very straightforward case, it's very easy to evidence. You should be allowed to do all of that, and then just immediately get them out within like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You can't always do that.
Now, the reality is there's multiple ways you can deal with problem tenants in your property. So in the description below, we're going to leave you a link to the National Rural Landlord Association. If you're not registered with these and you're managing your tenants properly yourself, then I would recommend definitely getting onto there and having a look at some of the resources. Also, you can also use fixed tenant prices to get your tenants out of the property if you are having these unfortunate situations with unpaid rent or tenants that just won't leave. We're going to be doing this talk show every month, and next month we've got a really exciting guest on. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and also give this video a like and drop some comments below if there's anything you want to see from our future videos. Now, as this is the first one we've done of this, we want some comments from you around whether we should change the name. What should we call this series, this talk show series? And if you want to come on and you've got some great things to share, then make sure you drop them in the comments below or drop us an email, and we look forward to seeing you next time.